You may begin when you like.
Thank you, Jesus. Welcome to the August 8th, 2022 meeting of the Community Board 6 Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Reshma Patel, and I'm chair of this committee. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. This meeting is called to order at 6:04 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot be counted towards quorum. So please remember this to all the members of the committee. Those who are not members of the committee, you do not have to follow by this, but we need a quorum to have any votes counted. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature in Zoom. If there is a time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. If you can take minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Is there anyone from the committee who is willing to take minutes tonight? Thank you, B, for always volunteering to take minutes. And
with the proviso that Brendan will help me.
Yes, Brendan can help you. I will also, since Brendan is not here, I can help you as well.
Okay, thank you.
We will now take attendance by roll call. Jesus will conduct the roll call. Jesus?
All right, everyone. Good evening. Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves when your name is called. Please stay present and I will announce at the end of the roll call whether there is quorum. Jim Collins. Jim Collins.
Oh, we can't hear you, Jim.
Okay, he's gesticulating in his camera. Let the record show that he's I guess he's having some audio issues. Next, B. Disman.
Present.
Thank you. Ava Marie Lassiter. Ava Marie Lassiter. All right, I'm not seeing her. Karen Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Stephen O.
Present.
Thank you. Reshma Patel.
Present.
Thank you. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven. Okay, I'm not seeing him. With 5 out of 7 members present, we do have quorum.
Thank you, Jesus. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom now.
We can't see the whole thing.
Oh, Jesus, could you scroll a little bit?
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm able to see the whole thing, Karen.
Yeah, I can't. It says it encompasses the whole screen. I can't scroll.
I can read the agenda. Maybe for those who can't see it. It's discussion of the NYC Districting Commission's proposed map and its impact within Manhattan Community Board District 6. Discussion of updates on CB6 fiscal year 2024 budget request, the chair's report, and any old or new business.
Thank you.
And if there are any objections, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, we will move on to the next item. And the agenda is adopted as is. The minutes from the April 11th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, We will, yes, Jim, we can hear you. It's very faint though, but we can hear you. If there are no objections to adopting the minutes as drafted, members of the committee, please raise your hand if you have any objections. Seeing no objections to the April 11th meeting minutes, the meeting minutes are adopted. They will be available on the CB6 website soon. I'm going to just have a few ground rules before we start. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe the following ground rules. No one can speak until granted the floor. So please raise your hand and I will call you to speak. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that has already been stated aloud and on record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. We are required by New York State law to have a transcript of this meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. And a reminder again that committee members are required by state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you must step away from your computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. The order of the adopted agenda should be followed. Tonight's agenda, as we saw earlier, is a discussion of the Redistricting Commission's proposed map and its impacts within Manhattan Community Board 6, the discussion and updates to CB6 fiscal year 2024 budget requests, and the chair's report, and then any old and new business. After the committee discussion of each agenda topic, there will be a Q&A period. And before the Q&A period with the public begins, any committee member can raise any questions that they have. The first agenda item, discussion of the Redistricting Commission, we have two speakers today. We are joined by Dan Kaminsky and Chris Collins. Dan Kaminsky is a policy manager of Citizens Union, and he will be talking to us about the redistricting process, how we can testify, what goes into the making sure that we are adequately voicing our opinions and our district needs are taken into account. And then Chris will talk about specifically the areas of the district which are part of City Council District 5 now. They're being moved to City Council District 26 in Queens. And we also have a draft resolution in support of keeping what is now part of the community of City Council District 5 within Manhattan. And we will be voting on that and discussing that after our speakers. Everyone who's on the committee should have received a draft of this resolution in advance. I'm going to turn it over to Dan now.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Rashma and the people of CB6. I will say I've been doing this for a little while, and this is my first ever triple-digit participant. So kudos to you. There's 100 of us on the call, and no other community board or community group has achieved that, which is awesome. And I think kind of clearly shows that you all have a pretty good head start in terms of knowing what's going on and knowing why it impacts you and how. So that certainly allows me to talk in certain ways about what's happening. Can I share my screen? Has that been enabled? Let me see. It has. Okay. So as was mentioned, my name is Dan Kaminsky. I'm from an organization called Citizens Union, which is a good government group. And among many things that we do, redistricting work is one of them. And I'm here to sort of elucidate and have folks understand the process, but really with the essential goal of having you engage in the process. So this is a process that has historically been responded to citizen feedback. And so I'm really here to encourage that process and kind of give you the overview of how to engage in it. So the other thing I'll say is there's a lot of information here. I have not been given a ton of time, so I'll cut where I think makes the most sense. And I saw questions in the chat. Please feel free to enter anything that feels confusing in the chat, and I'll be sure to, at the end, look at them and make sure we cover all the questions that are there. So just starting at the most basic level, just to kind of get us started here, what is redistricting? So it's the process of drawing new political boundaries, and it happens every 10 years after the census. And it happens to take into account the population and demographic changes that happened over the last 10 years. And I'm sure all of you know this today, we are only talking about council redistricting. Redistricting has dominated headlines for the past year because of what happened at the state level. That was a disaster, arguably as bad as it could have gone. Happy to answer questions about what went wrong there, but that's not what we're focusing on here. And to be very clear, this is a different process run by a different set of rules, run by a different commission. So you can put the disillusionment that you may feel from the state and kind of refocus to talking about city council here. So the place I'll start was just to ground us, and we'll talk about the new maps and what CD 5 and 4 look like and all of that, but just to ground us in kind of the rules. Let's start there. So there are 8 rules that the commission, and the commission, that's who draws the maps, them and their staff, have to follow to draw these new maps. I'm going to go through a couple of the rules that feel most relevant to you all. I'll go through them one by one, just to give you an understanding. So this first one is one person, one vote. And what that means is that each district should have roughly the same population to afford constituents roughly the same representation, right? So just theoretically, if one district had 1 person and one district had 1 million people, obviously the level of power in those districts is radically different, could afford to that 1 versus those million. So with that basic concept in mind, each district should have about the same number of people in it. And to get that same number of people, you take your total population, you divide it by how many districts there are in that place. So to look at New York City, we had, as of 2020, 8.8 million people. It's the largest our city's ever been by actually a pretty significant amount. We grew by 630,000 people over the last decade. And we have 51 council districts. And a question I often get is, can that change? That is in the city charter, that is not changing, right? So it's 51 council districts, that's set. The thing that changes is how many people there are. And so when you take 8.8 million, you divide it by 51 council districts, you get an ideal population, as it's called, of 172,000 people, right? So that's kind of the target. But it's not expected that each district has exactly that number of people. A 5% deviation is allowed. So what that means is you can have a 5% difference between the largest and the smallest districts in New York City. So the target can change. And it used to be 10%. This year it's 5%, right? So Governor Hochul signed that into law in October. And so that means that we have a lot more people and a lot less wiggle room, meaning that many districts in New York City have to change. So just looking at the overall map of New York now, you'll see the orange is underpopulated and the green is overpopulated, right? So again, 5% deviation, so less wiggle room than ever before, coupled with a very different population scattering than 10 years ago. So I'm gonna jump out for 1 second of the presentation and just look at your council district's numbers specifically. So let me just enlarge this. So if we look at council district 4, this is population by council district based on 2020 census, you'll see that you're at 184,000 people. Now, if you remember, that ideal population is about 172,000 people. So you're 12,000 people over ideal population, which is pretty significant, right? Similar with CD5, you're at 181, CD5's at 181,000, so about 9 or 10,000 people over population limits. And I'm going to zoom to CD26, which you are now in this first proposed map linked with, and we'll look at that together. But CD26 likewise is overpopulated by, I think, a similar amount. CD26 is also about 11 to 12,000 people overpopulated, right? So what this means for all 3 of these districts that I'm talking about is that the lines have to change. It's not a question of if they will change, it is how. And that's really the conversation that I hope you all will engage in full force, is how best to move around populations to best accommodate your needs. But Obviously, and as you all know, that the task of moving around people means that 10 to 15,000 people will wake up in a new district, even though they haven't moved. That obviously has very inherently political consequences because it changes who you're represented by, how funding happens, et cetera. Okay, so this is that first criteria. Probably the most complicated of them too. So hopefully it makes a little more sense now. The second one, which I'll do very briefly, but is rather important, is the Federal Voting Rights Act. What this does, arguably one of the most important pieces of legislation to come out of the civil rights movement was this act, which among other things says you can't dilute the voting power of racial and language minority groups. So what this means in practice, if you have a protected group under the Voting Rights Act, so let's say these red blocks on the left here is a protected group, a new map could not do what we see on the right because that would split up that group and dilute their voting power. And you want to keep them together. Map makers have to keep them together to ensure maximum voting power for those groups. That's the second criteria. Okay, moving along. The third one, which is relevant to you all, is contiguous districts, right? So districts, you can't have a part of a district here and another part way over there. And if you cross a body of water, it has to be connected in some way. And those some ways include tunnels, bridges, ferries, et cetera. So as long as there's some connection to districts that cross over boundaries, that is allowed. And the fourth criteria is crossover districts, also relevant to you all right now, is that, so ideally each district is entirely within the boundaries of one county. If a district has to cross over county boundaries, it can only happen one time per set of 2 boroughs. So for example, right now, Manhattan and Queens in this proposal are linked as CD26, CD5. That cannot happen anywhere else between those 2 boroughs. So those are the 4 required criteria. The commissioners have to follow each of these 4. There's no wiggle room here. They can't have 2 crossover districts. They can't put districts that aren't contiguous, et cetera. Those are the very explicit rules. The next 4 criteria, and I'm not going to go through all 4, I'll just actually go through one more, is as much as possible. So the language in the charter, I think, is explicitly that, as much as possible. So it's not a requirement. The commission should, as much as they can, try to follow these next 4 set of criteria, but there's, they are not explicitly required to. And the level that how they should follow them is in the order of priority. I've listed them on this screen. So keeping neighborhoods and communities of interest intact is the most important of this set of 4. So let me just start by defining a community of interest. I'm just going to read this verbatim. So a community of interest is a neighborhood, community, or group of people who have common policy concerns and would benefit from being maintained in a single district. Another way of understanding a community of interest is that it is simply a way for a community to tell its own story about what neighbors share in common and what makes it unique when compared to surrounding communities. It's defined by local members. So I think what stands out to me about this definition is, unlike the last set of criteria I showed, which has very strict parameters on what is and what is not allowed, this is the opposite, right? This is the commission saying, hey, you tell us what your community is, and we will do our best to accommodate it, right? But so you are the experts in your community. This is your argument to make. I will give some common examples, but again, I hope the point is you could throw all these examples away, and whatever you see as your geographic community, that's what to say. So common communities of interest that you hear in testimonies, transit lines, right? Let's say you want everybody in your surrounding community who takes a certain bus to all be in the same district so you can have advocacy on city council. School districts, right? Oftentimes school districts are among many council districts, and that is disadvantageous for people, for children and parents and so forth. Major business areas, any cultural hubs or religious institutions, places that share similar professions, right? Y'all are not far from, or maybe part of CB6 encompasses Hospital Row, right? So having that in a district, really whatever you're seeing as your community. Oh, another one, renters, right? Let's say you are around a bunch of renters and in a different part of the district is all homeowners, and you want to ensure all the renters remain together in a district so you can have proper advocacy from city council to ensure affordable housing issues or whatnot are attended to, right? Those are some examples that you hear often. Really throw them all out of the window. You all have, for whatever is relevant for you all. I think you have strong cases about how the Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island are connected in a community of interest. I'm sure that's a case to be made, along with many, many others, right? So there can be a lot of ways to frame this to argue that, you know, the Upper East Side and Sutton Place needs to be kept together for XYZ reasons. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this stuff again, just in the interest of time. And the other one, which the last one that I'll go through right now, is keeping neighborhoods together. So again, this is one of those, the not required criteria, the as much as possible criteria. So I'm going to pull up the New York City Population Fact Finder tool. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And if you click neighborhood tabulation area, it'll cut you up into neighborhoods. And then if you click add map layers, click on council districts, it shows you the council districts. So this is the current, this is what we've had for the last 10 years. So if I'm looking at neighborhoods that are split up, right, actually both CD5 and CD4 in their current iteration are not so bad. East Harlem, we see, you know, parts of East Harlem are sectioned out between a few different districts. And East Midtown is split between 4 and 5. Midtown is split between 4 and 5. So there are a few, but nothing super drastic from what I'm seeing. Obviously, you all are the experts in your district. Oftentimes, neighborhoods really don't like being in the purview of 2 or 3 or 4 even different council members, and they like their entire neighborhood to be fully within the purview of one member to ensure, you know, best funding, best advocacy, best legislation, et cetera. Okay, so I'm going to skip the other criteria. And I think everyone knows what city council does. If you don't, I'm happy to talk about why it's important, why it matters. But the fact that 100+ people are on the call kind of elucidates to me that people already are aware of this. So the next thing to move to is what has happened, right? So I outlined the criteria. That is what the commission had to follow in their first draft map. So they've released their first draft map on July 15th. Right now, we're in this 30-day window where New Yorkers are doing exactly what we're doing, looking through it, analyzing it, thinking about it, thinking what's best. And then we'll talk about the process as it unfolds in a minute. But I wanted to show you, and Chris, I'll hand it over to you in just a moment.
Sure.
This website, Redistricting You, where you can really look into the details of the map. And just to mention something as well, I will email out to Rashma, who can email out to hopefully everybody on this call, every resource and every link that I go over while I'm doing this presentation, so that people have access to all the resources at your fingertips. So this is a website called Redistricting You. What it allows you to do is compare the different draft maps as well as the old council lines, right? So I'll start with just up here. If you scroll to the left, the blue lines come up, which is the old city council district from the last 10 years. And then if you start scrolling, you can see where it's changing, right? So we can I'll leave it kind of in the middle here. So you can really well compare the old council district 5 to the new one, right? Where 5 and 26 meet. The other thing that it allows, so, and again, I'll let Chris kind of talk about the changes, but you can kind of see them here and I'll zoom in more in a moment. The other thing it allows you to do, I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting stuff this website allows you to do. And I'm showing this to you just so you can compare and contrast for yourself. On the left, it gives you population and demographics of the old district. On the right, it's the new district, right? So we see they shed Council District 5 from 181 to 173,000 people in this new map. It shows you all sorts of useful demographic data. It can show you race. So it's actually a more white district than it was prior, which might be something to argue that if they split up any different communities of color in this new map, that's a really important point to take into consideration, because we definitely see somewhat of a demographic change there. We see different redistricting measurements, right? So how compact was it before? How compact is it now? We see, you know, the electoral results. And then you can also click on legend and add in something like, add in really all sorts of useful information. We can do demographic information, right, to see where different communities and groups are. And then the last thing I'll do, and then Chris, I'll pass it to you to talk the dynamics of this specific plan, is as new plans come out or as everyday people create their own plans, they will upload them. So for example, the Unity map is a map created by a coalition of organizations around the city that do some really cool redistricting work. And so this, you can look at their plan and consider how that looks and so forth. So for now, Chris, I will leave this on the screen. I'll zoom in a little bit and you can tell me where to click. And if you want to just kind of talk about the dynamics of what happened in their first map as it relates to Council District 5 and 4.
Great, thanks very much. And thanks to Board 6 for putting this together this evening and for inviting me. I'm a retired city lawyer. I was the City Council's principal zoning and land use lawyer for 13 years. After that, I was a BSA commissioner, and many years ago was chair of Manhattan Community Board 8. No one appointed me or elected me to run this campaign. I sort of jumped into the fray when I saw the district lines and the extent to which they violate the criteria that is established in the city charter. And so I think the major point that I want to make this evening, in addition to talking about the obvious violations of the charter, is to talk about the extent to which these proposed lines violate the charter. So for example, the charter says you're supposed to avoid oddly shaped districts. This is a very oddly shaped district. It is almost impossible to justify. You're supposed to limit crossover districts, meaning you can't have more than a district with that's in more than 2 boroughs or counties. This is extreme in that, and let me give you an example. Current Council District 34, which straddles the border of Brooklyn and Queens, between Bushwick, Brooklyn, and Ridgewood, Queens, has been a crossover district for the last 2 census rounds. The neighborhoods have similar demographics, they have similar housing stock, they have similar issues with regard to housing, mass transit, education, and other issues. There is no diminution of sort of citizen voting power by having those neighborhoods combined. That is completely different than what is being proposed here. The district is not compact, and in fact, the connections, yes, we have a bridge and a tunnel that go between Manhattan and Queens, and we love our friends in Queens, but we don't have any subway lines that go between the 2 parts of this proposed district. And there are communities of interest that are not kept intact. Let me give you just a couple examples on that. One is, for example, on a major public policy question, the question of congestion pricing. Very broadly, generally speaking, Manhattanites support congestion pricing because the congestion is on our streets. Again, very broadly, people from boroughs other than Manhattan, including Queens, are not very much in favor of congestion pricing because they drive the cars and they'll pay the fee. How are the interests of this 27% of proposed Council District 26, i.e. the Roosevelt Island and Manhattan residents, who's going to be our voice on the issue of congestion pricing? Certainly not a council member who has a district that's 73% in Queens. Another practical difficulty that this will create is many of you are aware of the process of participatory budgeting, where council members pick out 5 or 6 capital budget items, like new air conditioning for your branch library, or a new roof for your public school, or capital spending in your local neighborhood parks. And the voters actually vote on those, and the ones that win get the money. What is the likelihood that the Manhattan portion of this proposed district will ever prevail on a participatory budgeting issue? I say it's slim to none. Another question is access to your elected officials. Will the member from this Queens district have a district office in Manhattan to address, in particular, the concerns of the extraordinarily high percentage of seniors who reside in community districts 6 and 8? On so many levels, I think that this proposal is not just difficult, but almost impossible to defend. And we are organizing buildings and neighborhoods and organizations to write letters, to send them by snail mail, send them by email, send them however you can. I am working on trying to get a bus or buses to go to the Manhattan hearing, which is 2 weeks from tonight on the 22nd at the Schomburg Center on Malcolm X Boulevard. Our time frame is pretty tight here, ladies and gentlemen. As Dan will likely tell you shortly, the Districting Commission will make its submission to the City Council of its next round of proposed district lines sometime around the 3rd week in September. So we have about 6 weeks to get this campaign into high gear. And we need to do everything we can to reverse this first proposal. But we need to do it by giving the commission plausible alternatives. We can't just say, we don't like this, fix it. So we're gonna use some of the tools that Dan is sharing with us. And we're gonna try and come up with reasonable alternatives that the Districting Commission can adopt that preserve the communities of interest that under the current proposal are being cleaved. I'll stop right there and take questions at the appropriate time. Thank you all.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chris. Well said. And I think that gives you a pretty good idea of, we're going to jump into structuring testimony, but types of things you can pull for your testimony. I've had the map up here for a while, but just to talk specifics. So what they have done for Council District 5, and maybe you all have seen this, is they moved Roosevelt Island and a significant number of blocks from 79th Street to 55th Street, 54th Street into Queens Council District 26, right? So what used to be an entirely Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island district looking like this, CD5 now looks like that. And this part of Roosevelt, well, all of Roosevelt Island and then some of Sutton Place and the like gets moved into the Queens Council District. Okay, so with that, let's talk about process. How's this all going to unfold? So firstly, I've been saying the Districting Commission a lot. So who is that? Who are the people that draws these maps? So the Districting Commission is made of 15 commissioners. Those 15, 7 of them were appointed by the mayor. 8 of them were appointed by City Council. And so their appointees, of those 8, 5 were appointed by the Democratic Conference, 3 were appointed by the Republican Conference, again in City Council. So that's the 15. They elected their own chair, a guy named Dennis Walcott, who maybe sounds familiar for people. He's currently the head of the Queens Public Library. He's the former education chancellor, so been around city politics for a long time. And they've already started their work. So here's the timeline. So firstly, something that already passed was the preliminary hearings, which happened at the end of May and then the end of June and early July. And those hearings were a chance for New Yorkers to weigh into the commission on what they believe the first draft map should look like. Now, what I think is notable is that CD4 and CD5 were very underrepresented at those hearings. Right. So I think, I don't have an exact count, but I think something like 10 people testified from CD5, mostly arguing to keep Roosevelt Island with CD5. And I think 1 or 2 people, that's it, testified for CD4. When you compare that to, let's say, neighborhoods in South Brooklyn, where 100 people came out to testify, 170 people, I should say, came out to testify, or neighborhoods in Queens where 100 people came out to testify, 2 people is pretty underrepresented. And so it's a lot easier for the commission to kind of do what they will without getting that robust citizen feedback. There's, again, right now 120 of you on this call. If every single person on here on this call testifies, it's going to be very hard for the commission to ignore what you're saying. So, okay, that's what happened. And then July 15th is when they published that first draft map that we just looked at. Now, to be very clear, it is a draft map. And this is something they say over and over again. When they released it, they say it should have an under construction sign on it. That was a quote from the meeting, and that this is the time when now they really need to begin hearing from citizens about what this looks like and how it looks for everyday folks. So that happened. And right now we're in that 30-day period to do, as I said in the beginning, what we're doing, kind of analyzing the maps, thinking about how it should look. And the public hearings begin. I apologize, they changed the dates, so this is not the most up to date. The public hearings begin August 16th, not August 15th. So the hearing dates are 16, 17, 18, 21st, and 22nd. It is borough-specific hearings, so there's going to be one hearing per borough, with the Manhattan hearing, as Chris said, happening in Harlem at the Schaumburg Center on the 22nd at 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. That said, if you can't make it on the 22nd, you can show up to any of the hearings. It is entirely okay to show up at any hearing and testify about what's happening in your borough. If you can make it to Manhattan, I think that's really helpful. But if you can't, it's still better that you testify. Hearings happen both remote and in person. So you can, show up virtually or in person, whatever works for you. And if you need translation or accommodation, you can request that in advance as you're registering. And again, I will send the link to Rashma to send out to all of you on how to sign up to register to testify. So that's what's happening essentially right now. And that is the most critical part of the process. So you're engaging in this process at the exact right time. Then after that, there's a 30-day window for the commission to absorb all that testimony, to absorb all that feedback, and then synthesize it and potentially redraw the maps or make changes. They don't have to, they're not required to, but often they do. A month after that, September 22nd, they submit the maps to the city council for the first time. City council has 3 weeks to accept or reject the draft maps. If they accept the maps, that's it. So this process is over, and this means that August hearings are the only time for you to engage in the process. If they don't do anything, same thing, the maps are automatically accepted. If they reject the maps, they go back to the commission, and the commission, it triggers a second round. So we don't know the exact dates of that second round, but in mid-fall, the commission would come out with a second draft of their map. Sometime in late fall, again, I don't know the exact dates, there would be another round of hearings, for more people to weigh in on their second draft. And by February 7th, no matter what, is the final deadline to submit the last plan to the city clerk. City council has no authority over this second draft map. So unlike what we saw happen at the state level, where legislators took control of the process and it went very awry, for the city council, there's forced independence, because city council ultimately has no power to change, to adjust, to alter, to reject the map, so long as the commissioners vote to accept it. From our perspective, that's a good thing, because you don't want legislators drawing their maps for themselves to run in their own districts. So that happens February 7th. And then 3 weeks later, after that, the petitioning starts. And then June will be the primary. So you may know, typically a council term is 4 years. This time around, it's 2 years because of this process. The council members will have to immediately run in the new districts that the maps produce. And that's the full process. So really the end of this process is February 7th. Okay, so again, let me exit this screen and go on to mapping. So, again, my goal here is to get as many of you to engage in the process as possible. And one of the best ways to engage is drawing your own map. It's one thing to say, hey, please keep Sutton Place with, Council District 5. It's another thing to draw explicitly what you're asking for. Explicitly, hey, I'm from this district. This is what the district should look like to best represent my needs. And so sometimes people feel really overwhelmed when I bring this mapping page up. I really want to make it as user-friendly as possible. This is the commission's own mapping tool that they've published for, New Yorkers to use. And in my opinion, it's very user-friendly. I know I'm running low on time, so I'll just do this, just a brief overview. And again, hopefully it'll make some amount of sense. So the website's districtr.org and then /tag/New York City 2022. It'll get you to this page. Let's say you want to start by working on their draft proposal. So if you see down here, there's draft proposal A, you can click that and it's going to load up their map proposal. So it's split us up into 51 different colors. So let me just zoom in here to Council District 5 area. All right. So if you click this paintbrush on the upper right-hand corner, it'll break down to 51 different colors, right? Now, if I hover over a color, it'll tell me what council district that color is. So I see this, what is that? Pink magenta color is 5. So if I click it, then my paintbrush is going to be in 5. And then this brush size is how big or small I want it. So do I want to just be painting by the block or do I want whole neighborhoods? So I'll go pretty small. Now, let's say, again, this is their proposal and I want to re-bring in Sutton Place, the Upper East Side, and Roosevelt back into Council District 5. So I just start clicking away and we see that it's changing color. And if you look at the numbers on this portion of the screen, you'll notice that the Council District 5 numbers are going up and the Council District 26 numbers will be going down. So now let's say I just repaint that around. Okay, and I'm doing this very sort of, not too intentionally, but all right. So now we see I'm way overpopulated. This line here, if you can see that, is the maximum population. So now I would need to go in, and it really is one big jigsaw puzzle. I would need to go in and figure out how I can adjust that to make it within population bounds. So let's say I wanted to, remove some population from up here into Council District 4. And again, I'm making this up. This is just totally, so I would begin painting this. And now, okay, we see that the Council District 5 population has gone down, the 4 population has gone up, right? So this is how you would begin to do it. If you click data layers, you can click City Council Districts 2012, and that puts on the current council district lines if you want to use that as a guide for when you're painting. And if you want to click on demographics, you can do that as well by clicking variable. You can choose which population you're looking at, and it'll show up as, okay, where is that population within the confines of your district? So you can keep in mind voter dilution, not breaking groups up. Once you're done, so let's say I painted this district and it looks really good to me. This is the district I want. Again, I would not recommend sending this particular district in because since it's so overpopulated, the commission couldn't really take it into consideration. So you don't need to be exact, but at least within somewhat of the boundaries of what they have to work on. But let's just say for, hypothetical sake, this looked good to me and I want to send it in. I could click save. And then this screen would pop up. If I click share to gallery, it would automatically be sent into the commission. Or conversely, if I just want to copy this link, this is your unique link. And so then when you email in your testimony or you send in your testimony, it'll have this link and they'll look through it. So whichever works for you. And that link, even if you continue working on it, that link is still the same link. You don't need to make new links every time you're saving. So, okay, that's the first thing to show. The second thing to show is I'm going to go back to the homepage here. So from there, I was just working off of the commission's first draft map. Let's say instead I want to work off a blank map. I can click this purple box, which is start drawing, and this would be a blank map, and it works exactly the same. And here, if you don't want to create, a full map, you just want to create CD5. Again, you click the paintbrush. It gives you all the colors. And you can just start painting. Again, I'm just doing this randomly. I'm not actually suggesting. Whoops, I overpopulated. So let me erase a little bit. But you can just paint and okay, perfect. I'm close. And I like that for Council District 5. That's what it should look like. Same thing. I save it and I send it in. And the last thing to show is this community of interest idea. So works very similarly. but instead of council districts, let's say I don't want to have to think about my entire council district. All I know is that, Sutton Place forms a community of interest with the Upper East Side for whatever reasons. So instead of drawing the full council district, I could just draw that these couple blocks need to remain together, right? Right now, 4 and 5 splits them up, but let's say I think that they need to remain together. I can just draw that, label that's my community, which is XYZ community, describe it, and similarly send it in. So that's how mapping works. Again, that was very quick, but I hope you got at least the basics of it, of how to use District R. And I think once you start using it, I think it's user-friendly enough for people to kind of intuit how to use it. So, okay, we're almost done. And then I see there are questions in the chat. I promise we will get to them. So finally, how do you structure your testimony? So I don't know if people here have testified before. It can be, overwhelming if you've never done it before. So I'm here to try and give you a structure. There's no one right way to do this. You can structure it however you'd like, but this is just hopefully somewhat of kind of a guide to help you walk your way through it. And again, you will get this PowerPoint in your email so you can follow it along. So from our perspective, we think that if you answer 4 basic questions, you've written a good testimony. Those 4 basic questions are: who are you? What's the issue? Why is it an issue? How should the issue be resolved? So to go through those a little bit more, who are you? So here you want to say your name and you want to say where you live. And that can feel uncomfortable for people, but we have to realize that this is a geographic exercise, right? And so placing yourself in community, saying, oh, I'm a member of Roosevelt Island and I've lived here for 20 years. That adds weight to your testimony and kind of roots you in place. And that is a really important part of that intro. Personal background. So here you'll want to keep it super brief. Just really, you get 3 minutes. So whatever's relevant to the testimony, and then organizational affiliation where relevant. And again, this is just to help credentialize you in the mind of the commissioners. Next, moving on to what? So what's your main point, right? Why are you here? Okay, Roosevelt Island got split off from CD5. That's my main point. I'm here to ensure that Roosevelt Island remains connected to CD5. That's the heart of the, okay, I know exactly what the reason, the commission knows exactly the reason why you're in front of them today. So then moving on to why. Okay, so we know that you're here because you really want Roosevelt Island to be part of CD5, but why, right? Why does that matter to you? Why is that important? Why should we consider what you're saying? How does the fact that it's moved to CD26 affect you? How does it affect your community? Is there evidence to show why it's an issue and how it'll affect your community? And so what Chris did just before there was a really strong example of this why. He broke down 26% and 73%, right? That's data, that's hard facts. He talked about different issues of how it's going to affect the community in different ways, right? And so especially if a lot of you are testifying, hopefully you all will kind of bring different pieces of the puzzle to show that there's an overwhelming amount of affect, the overwhelming negative results of why it's going to affect the community negatively in various ways. But so this is quite important. And then, I just to mention, I said this, but the evidence, it's great if you have anecdotal evidence, but really if you can do what Chris did before and find hard facts, right? What data, census, budgets, anything that, he's talking about, participatory budgeting, anything to show that this is really going to impact the community. And then finally, and probably the most important part, is how should this be resolved, right? And so here you want specific geographic recommendations on what you want the commission to do, right? It's one thing to say, keep Sutton Place part of CD5. They may view Sutton Place on the Upper East Side very differently than you do, right? So if there's one thing, and I've heard commissioners say this as well, if there's one thing that you need to get through in your testimony, it's boundaries, 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 right? Really ensuring that you are communicating to the commission explicitly what the boundaries of your council district should look like, and how that should happen. Please move the northwest districts of the boundary this way, please, et cetera. So they feel very clear on what you're asking for and then why, right? So you're asking for CD5 to include Roosevelt Island and Sutton Place. Again, that's just based on what I'm hearing. And that is important because, right? And so getting that in is really kind of the heart of it. Okay, now you can testify in person. I hope you will testify in person. But if for whatever reason you can't, you can email this email address, publictestimony@redistricting.newyorkcity.gov at any time. The commission will look this over. However, when you're standing there in front of the 15 commissioners, it's far more effective. And so again, we really hope you can make it out virtually or in person. But if you can't, you can still email that. And that's your way to get your testimony and your maps in regardless. Some best practices, if you do testify, again, I don't know if people have, but be concise and to the point, right? So again, you have 3 minutes to make your case. So you're going straight to it that you want, again, Roosevelt Island to be part of CD5 for these reasons, and here's what it should look like, et cetera. Practice ahead of time. Speak like all good public speaking stuff, take deep breaths, speak clearly, make eye contact, all those kind of basics. And then 2 more that I'll say, and then I'm almost finished here, but one is their strength in numbers. So again, there's 120 people on this call. If all of you testify, that's incredibly powerful. And so I really encourage as many of you to engage in this process as you possibly can and organize other. Chris, is, as he mentioned, is doing testimony writing drives and driving up to the trying to organize bus up to Harlem. But from the Upper East Side, hopefully it's doable, even if that doesn't end up happening. And again, you can also come in virtually. So really get as many people to make this point as you possibly can. And the reverse is something is better than nothing. And when I say that, I mean, if you have time to draw the map, amazing. We strongly recommend it. If you have time to find data, amazing. If you have time to organize your neighbors, amazing. If you don't, say something, right? Saying something is better than not saying anything at all. And so engaging in some way in this process, even if it's just one basic point, again, is better than not having your voice be heard. So on that note, what I want to also show is a little bit of history on this. And so the history I want to show, this document that I'm just pulling up here is the commission from 10 years ago's justification for why they chose the lines that they did, again, last decade. And so really, I'm showing this it's interesting, but for one major reason. So let's see, okay, not a great example. Let me show this one. Okay, so I'm going to show you District 6, which is your neighbors across Central Park, and I'm showing it to you for a very explicit reason. So District 6 is composed of these neighborhoods. Changes in District 6 are made to adhere to the keeping neighborhoods intact. This is the main point, though. Two concerns voiced at public hearings were the communities of interest that exist between Harborview Terrace and Amsterdam Houses, 2 NYCHA developments, and a residential building at 10 West End Avenue in Riverside. The revised plan addresses both concerns by including all 3 houses within Council District 6. Right. So what I'm showing this for, and then actually I'll continue reading. In addition, in order to remedy pre-existing conflict with the charter's length times width that was raised in public testimony, Central Park was moved from District 8 into District 6 to keep it compact. So I'm bringing this up because what we see, especially with this one, right, is that they came out with something in their first plan, similar to what they did now. People did not like this at all, and they organized and showed up at the hearings. And so these concerns, which were voiced at the public hearings, the commission listened to and ultimately redrew the map to include all 3 of these complexes within District 6. If you were to read, I'll actually do one more just to keep showing the same example. This is a group I worked with just the other day. So this is Van Nest in the Bronx. Let me show it to you on the map. So Van Nest is a neighborhood up here in the Bronx. It's split between Council District 13 and 15, and it's split right in half in the current council map. And B, I see your hand. Let me just finish this point, and then we're open to questions. So 10 years ago, oopsie, that's not the right link. 10 years ago, here's what we see. In response to public testimony, the revised plan keeps the Van Nest neighborhood in districts 13 and 15 instead of dividing the area into 3 council districts as proposed in a previous preliminary plan. Right, so 10 years ago, the first plan came out, it divided Van Nest into 3. People came out, as you all are going to come out, I hope, in force. The commission could not ignore them, and they redrew it, not perfect, but into 2 as opposed to 3. And I will say this time, if we look at their first proposed map, again, they came out very strongly this time. and organized. And now Van Nest is entirely within Council District 13. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. Nope, I keep going wrong. There we go. Sorry. Van Nest is entirely within Council District 13, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that if you organize, if you all testify, this really has been a process that historically has accommodated citizen engagement. And so I hope that can kind of influence or dissuade any disillusionment that you may feel and encourage you to testify. I can't guarantee that you'll get what you want, but I can guarantee if you don't show up, closed mouths don't get fed, and you will absolutely not get what you want. So with that, let's open it up. I'll stop my screen share, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I see a few in the chat, but Beatrice, we can start.
Yeah. So thank you, Dan, and thank you, Chris, for your presentations and for your time tonight. We're opening up to questions and comments from the committee members.
Yeah, so mine is a comment that I want to make. I want to make sure we have a quorum and that we have the resolution that we have. Perhaps, Rashma, we could take up the resolution and deal with the issues there quickly and then answer the questions. Because I think in order for us to move this to our meeting on Wednesday, we have to deal with the resolution. And I'm afraid we will lose our quorum if we don't move.
Yes, and Brian raised that as well. Dan actually has another meeting to go on to, so he won't be able to respond to the questions though. And
I have a training at
well.
7.
Yeah, and
but I can stay for 5 minutes.
And as does Chris, they had something at 7. So I would rather, if no one from the committee has told me they need to leave now, so people from the committee can stay on. I think that if we can have at least 5 minutes for Q&A with the speakers, that would be very helpful, especially given the large number of public attendees that we have.
Great. So I'll just start scrolling through the questions I see in the chat. So the first one, do residents count only include? So it's based on the 2020 census. So the numbers that are being used are the numbers that were counted in the 2020 census. Finding plausible alternatives, does that mean we on Sutton Place should try to figure out the lines should be drawn in Queens? You can do a full citywide map. If you are fully keeping yourselves in Manhattan, though, I would stick to Manhattan, unless you want to start venturing into Queens, but that's its own can of worms. And, but again, that is very much up to you as you begin drawing the maps.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make one comment. There's 3 people who have their hands raised. If you could put your questions in the Q&A, if you haven't done so already. And since this is being televised on YouTube, it's live. If you could just read the question before you answer, or I can read the question. So
absolutely, I apologize. So the next question from Eleanor is, what are the options enabling Sutton to remain as part of Manhattan? That is a question for all of you to begin brainstorming and playing with the maps. And, I'm not here to propose any lines. I'm here just to kind of help you in this process. Can these slides be, can these slides be emailed to meeting attendees? They're very informative. Rashma, do we have the potential I've been saying we're going to email everything to everybody, but is that, you have everyone's email address? We can share with people, and if anyone who doesn't have it, we should have everyone's emails through Zoom, but if you don't get it, please email the CV6 office, and I will get the slides to you. Great. So I will email out all of the resources I went through and many, many more, in fact, over, and then you'll get it in your inbox hopefully tomorrow. What is the difference between testifying and attending the August 22nd hearing? No different. If you attend and you don't testify, then you're just attending. But if you testify, it means you are, because there will be members of the public there probably just to listen, maybe not. If you're testifying, you are making your voice heard about what you want for your district. You do need to register in advance, and I will put that registration link in the email as well. And when you're registering, if you have any needs about, language needs, accessibility needs, etc., you can put that in there as well.
Let me just add, if I might, that we've been told that at the upcoming public hearings that they will alternate between live testimony and virtual testimony. Exactly. So, but Dan is right. It's important to register in advance. The second point I wanted to make is that I don't have the bus arrangements yet, I will do my very best to get them taken care of within the next day or two, and I'll do everything I can to disseminate that information.
Yes. So I think the next one is more of a comment than a question. I haven't finished reading it, so I'll just read it out loud from Stuart. Residents of current District 26 in Queens are advantaged by the instant proposal, presumably they mean the draft map, since it dilutes votes from Manhattan. This would have already been obvious to the commission. If residents of current District 26 testify favorably in large numbers, will the commission give weight to the number of people who testify from Queens versus Manhattan as much as to the substance of objections? That's a really interesting question. And to some degree, you know, if one group wants something a lot and another group wants the opposite thing, how do you weigh those things? And I would say that the criteria that I went over, maybe people have been in contact with folks from CD26. I personally don't think they're in love with this proposal either. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of pushback from them. But, you know, if you want to do some cross-borough collaboration, that's always great. And I think that the strength of your argument is really quite strong. If you're talking about, yeah, I mean, really all the things that Chris was saying, I would focus on making the arguments from the criteria standpoint of, you know, that we were talking about, especially hinging on communities of interest and how it splits those up. I think you have a strong argument, but it's impossible for me to say what exactly the commission is going to do. Chris, if you want to add anything to that, feel free.
No, I think you've really covered it.
Cool. Thank you. The next question is, thank you. Where is the Manhattan meeting in August? So again, the Manhattan meeting is on August 22nd, and it's at the Schaumburg Center from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. So one thing we've advocated for is they used to do it from 4 to 7 p.m. And we said that's not okay for working people. And so they've extended their hours to make sure that they really get everybody's feedback in there. Okay, how do we reach Chris to help? So in the email, what I'll do is I will put both my email address and Chris's email address, and you can reach out to both of us to ensure that, and we are here to help you in this process however you can. Chris obviously has all the local knowledge. So if you have specific things, he's your guy, and I can help you with formulating testimonies in ways that feel good for the commission, and also just anything with the process that you're looking for. The next question is there a formal width and length requirement? So again, I did it pretty quick today because of time restraints, but the requirement here is that a district can't be twice as long as it is wide. So that is the formal width and length requirement. Where do you send your response to public testimony? So again, I will put that in the email, but just in case, you know, I'll put that in the chat right now.
And Dan, those information like that, we can also, the board office can also share that too. So not to take up more time. So I would just answer questions of substance. A lot of the information or email kind of information, we can send out, people can reach out to CB6 office to get that information.
Great. Okay. Next question, maybe not substance, but Chris, they want to know if you're going to hold another meeting to help kind of brainstorm and prepare for for the hearing in 2 weeks.
I do not have one scheduled at the moment. However, seeing the level of interest, the number of people who showed up to this, as a former community board chair, I don't think I've ever seen 120 people show up at a committee meeting. This is outstanding. We will hold as many meetings in the area, in the neighborhood, as we need to get as organized as we can be. So I don't have one scheduled right now, but I'll be in touch with a lot of you, and we will do our best to include everyone in the process.
Great.
And I'm sorry to say, but I need to run.
Okay, Chris, I think there's one more for you. You have actually a couple, so I'll get to your ones. Firstly is,
okay,
can you forward that list of concerns that you mentioned in response to the email?
Yes.
Okay, great. So
I'll send that to the community board.
Great. So you'll get maybe 2 separate emails about that. And the other one that looks like for you,
Chris, actually, would you mind putting your email in the in the Q&A or chat function? So because there's a lot of people who want to get involved, want to help. It might just be
I'll do that.
Yeah, for you to share your email, and if it's okay for people to reach out to you directly, I'm assuming it is since you've been organizing this.
Yep. How do I write this, Bob?
So if you put in the chat.
I have Chris's email. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Stanley asking about the borders. So again, I'll email the links to you and you can kind of play around with what the district looks like. Chris, one more it looks like for you is, do you have any other perspectives on the new Greenway and how it integrates communities of interest?
I don't, but
okay.
certainly parks and open space is a very important issue for this part of Manhattan because we're open space starved, and it's a substantive policy issue that we need to raise with the commission. And now I really do need to run, but thank you all.
And thank you.
And the final one, LIC and surrounding areas have changed during the past 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's not a question. It's just
That's
someone
a
making
comment.
a statement. Yep.
All right, I think we got through the question list. Thank you all so much. I have to also run directly to another meeting. I hope this was helpful. Again, we're here to help however we can. You can put my email in there as well. And yeah, thanks so much. This was great. I hope to see you at the Manhattan hearing.
And thank you so much, Dan, for your time tonight.
Pleasure. Bye.
And thank you to the members of the public for attending. And we will now move on to the draft resolution that was sent to the committee members. And B, you wanted a call to question. Does anyone need the draft resolution shared if for whatever reason you did not have it or need it again? Okay, it doesn't look like, I think everybody is good, so I'll turn it over to you, B.
Thank you. So I was going to call the question. I think if you looked at the resolution, it dealt with the issues that Dan and Chris articulated. Plus, there is a proposal there of what an area might look like. So I would like to call the resolution, which opposes the current consideration and also gives a proposal of what it might look like. So I'm calling the question. I don't know if you have a second.
Brian?
I'll second.
And just for the members of the public, you can see the resolution, it's being displayed here, and the resolution goes to support, what Chris has been organizing for and what we talked about in that we want to keep Sutton Place and Roosevelt Island within the CD5 borders and not in CD26. And this resolution, once passed, the committee will vote on it now, then it gets voted by full board, which will happen on Wednesday, and then it will be posted on the CB6 website for everybody to review.
Actually, once it passes the committee tonight, it will immediately be put up on the CB6 website on the resolution tracker, even in draft form, so people in advance of full board, they'll be able to read it.
Thank you, Jesus, for that clarification. I see Jim Collins' hand up, and then before we call to vote, I'd like Jim, if you have any comments. We can't hear you.
I don't see the map.
You don't see the what?
The map. The map.
Oh, okay. Jesus, do you have the, oh, there, the map. Did you have anything else, Jim?
No.
Okay, and B, did you have anything else? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think what's important with this proposal is there is a recommendation at the bottom of the proposal that it be further resolved, which kind of equalizes the populations. And as Dan said, it had to be within 5%, and it had to be close to 172,000. So when you look at it, that gives a proposal of 177,000 for CD4 and 177,176. I think this is very factual, and I would move that we support it as a committee.
All right, so the motion has been seconded, so I'm going to call a vote. Jesus, would you like to conduct the vote?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, members of the committee. We will now proceed to a vote on the resolution displayed on the screen. When I call your name, please clearly state whether you are in favor, opposed, or whether you abstain or are not entitled to vote. All right, Jim Collins. All right, I see your lips moving, but I hear nothing.
Jim, if you could raise your hand if you favor, because we can't hear you.
Okay, you're waving your, so thumbs up if you're in favor.
Abstain.
He said abstain.
Abstain, okay, so that's one abstain. Pete Disman,
In favor?
Ava Marie Lassiter. She is not here. Karen Moore,
In favor?
all right. Stephen O,
In favor.
okay, thank you. Reshma Patel,
In favor.
thank you. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
In favor.
thank you. All right, with 5 committee members in favor, none opposed, 1 abstention, and none not entitled, this resolution does move on to the full board meeting on Wednesday. It will be posted tonight to the CB6 website. Just go to cb6cbsix.org and click resolutions. It'll be at the top before the end of the evening.
Thank you, Jesus. I'd just like to also thank all the committee members who, normally we don't have meetings in August and you guys made the time to join today. And I'd like to thank all the members of the public for joining. And I also like to add that if you do want to testify at the hearing that is happening, Chris Collins does have a draft letter that everybody can send in too. So if that makes it easier for people, you can email Chris and get that. The next item on our agenda is an update to the budget, but given the time, our meeting has run longer than expected because of this issue with the districting. We will table that until our next meeting in September, unless anybody objects here from the committee. Seeing no objections, in terms of new business, it really is, we're going to have to submit all our final district needs statements by October. So the September meeting will be a really detailed meeting where hopefully we'll have all the requests and information that we need from the different committees on budget needs, and we will be looking at the district needs statement. Anybody have any old or new business they'd like to discuss?
I will say that anyone from the committee or any member of the board that's watching at home tonight, if you have not yet RSVP'd with the office that you're coming to the Wednesday full board meeting, please do so. The office needs to know so that we have a sense of what quorum is looking like on Wednesday. We've heard from some of you. If we have not heard from you, if you've not CC'd the office, please do so.
Thank you. And the only other new business item that I'd like to, Jim, I know you've made a suggestion that we were going to work on. If anybody else has any other issues, topics that they want to discuss, once we submit the budget request at the end of October, the meetings that go, in early part of 2023 would be more focused on governmental affairs issues. And if there are issues you'd like to bring up, please let me know at the next meeting and we can put that as an agenda item. And thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn unless anyone else has anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you, Karen. Brian?
Same.
Same, okay. With that, the meeting has ended at 7:18 p.m.